Nixies are coming in from the cold. Fresh on the back of Spiderman remastered port from PC, they now have Miles Morales pushing PC for 60 FPS and above, and even the Steam Deck enters the fray. But how does it all compare to the PlayStation 5? With the foundation built in the first game, Insomniac's fast expansion on that in Miles Morales released with the PlayStation 5 2 years ago, adding a suitably wintry theme to its debut, and just like that title on the PlayStation 5, Nixies have not delivered a significantly new game here, more an update and iteration on the excellent remastered base they delivered earlier this year. As such, from the graphical menu, extensive temporal reconstruction choices, pre-launch settings screen, ultra-wide display and extended graphics, and ray tracing specific options, this is all familiar territory I covered back in that original PC release, bar one new addition: ray traced sun/moon shadows, which is a unique new feature over the PlayStation 5 version. But it does present a conundrum in which is better, but more on that later. So kicking off the comparisons, we take my RX 6800 with a Zen 3 5600X 6-core 12-thread CPU at 4.8 GHz paired with 32 GB of DDR4 RAM and 6 GB per second SSD. We have a machine that offers more power overall than the PlayStation 5 specs with the same RDNA 2 base. As such, this game runs at 4K with Insomniac's Temporal Injection Reconstruction AA. It's not often fully GPU bound at 60 FPS. As before, the title is very demanding on CPU due to the same areas I covered in the previous video. Namely, the ray tracing setup work, data requests, decom and streaming is mostly offloaded on the PlayStation 5 via its dedicated ASIC I/O block, with the game flooding the PCIe lanes at times with up to 18 GB per second at some points, meaning the PC requires a faster CPU than the Zen 2 of the PlayStation 5 to handle all this constant workload. This is reinforced in my tests here. Even on this 4.8 GHz CPU compared to the PS5's 3.5 GHz, it can often dip below 60 FPS as it becomes CPU/data bound most of the time. To highlight how much it can still be CPU bound even with ray tracing off, here I'm comparing the PS5 with its performance mode 4K DRS against the same mode or as similar as I can get on the PC, no ray tracing enabled, everything set to high aside very high textures. Using this run through of an early battle with Rhino demonstrates the two machines can trade leads at times, and that's even with a 37% faster CPU. The RX 6800 is often not taxed here during the first few minutes or so of action, being CPU data bound almost all the time. But once into the later, far more on-rails indoor shopping mall section, it does become more GPU bound, but still not 100%. At this point, the PS5 most certainly is. And here we may see points where it has a slightly higher resolution on PC to the PS5, but overall in these performance sections, you can see that the visual difference and performance differences is quite academic. That's not to say that the PlayStation 5 is superior to this PC, it's not. As in overall this section it does run faster on the PC, but not to any significant margin over the PlayStation 5. That's not to say that doesn't carry over to some of the other modes.
My fishing on the Volga!
Nice!
The power over life and death!
Oh, baby!
Excites me!
Let's ignite! Gotcha! Thank you! You're welcome!
You're drifting Helix 2.
But once you move to that fidelity matching mode where the GPU can now stretch its legs, we can see that the RX 6800 is approximately 33% faster than the PlayStation 5, and this is with RT shadows turned on at high, which shows the power is being used, but as most things sit in the ultra camp on PC, the increase is not linear to the payback in visual terms. Overall, the performance of Miles is very similar to the remastered release, but that was updated and improved since our review code, and this carries over to the new game. In terms of performance, matching the fidelity mode to the PS5 on this RX 6800, you would be close to a locked 60 FPS from a GPU perspective with the same settings and similar visual quality. But in terms of CPU, you will need a far faster one than even an RX 5600X here. So expect something around an i9 10900K or potentially a 5800X 3D. That would possibly give you a locked 60 FPS in the open gameplay sections. The game has a flip-flop demand on performance. In most of the open traversal sections, you will be very reliant on the CPU and the data throughput of your system, but in these on-rails or closed-off sections of combat, you will be far more skewed toward a faster GPU. Therefore, I'd recommend something around a 6700 XT or an RTX 3070 to target a locked 60 FPS at a dynamic 4K resolution. Obviously, you could then use DLSS or FSR 2.1 to improve on that further. But the game has a plethora of scaling options, including turning off ray tracing, lone visual settings, and resolution, which means if you want to target higher than 60 FPS, even on this particular machine, you can do that. Just getting a locked 120 FPS is likely going to be very difficult. But all those scaling options help us in the next comparison in the Steam Deck.
Before that happens.
Hello, tiny spider.
With Valve PC in your hand, it swings in with an excellent version of Miles' web-slinging adventure. Compared to the 4K RT PC version, the obvious sacrifices come in texture and material details, effect quality, resolution and frame rates. But using the excellent menu options with a mixture of medium and low, setting at 900p DRS with FSR 2.1, which is superior to the PC version of Insomniac's own temporal injection upsampler, you can stay within the 33 millisecond frame time to maintain a cap of 30 FPS within the game's half refresh menu option. In docks mode on a 4K screen, as you see here, then the visual cutbacks on resolution, depth of field, hair quality materials are obvious, as is the lack of any ray tracing, but it still offers a great version of the game that delivers the lion's share of the visual quality. With performance being maintained well at 30 FPS even during traversal, that is close enough to the base PS4 experience to never cause any great offence. The game really works so much better in handheld mode, with the smaller screen and excellent sound abilities of the hardware scaling to a brilliant way to play on the go, and I've actually played quite a good few hours of it already. The tailored controls and refined DirectX to Vulkan wrapper within Wine still impresses, with specific improvements handled by Nixes to ensure you get the best experience possible right out of the box.
But then you delivered big time. You saved my bacon, Miles.
The biggest improvement the PC version offers is the addition of a new shadow rendering mode, ray trace shadows from the sun or moon. This offers smaller and far more objects now casting shadows, and distant views improve solidity due to how shadows are now cast across buildings, objects and people walking around much further off into the depth of the camera. And this is where it works best in longer views, having more shadows and contrast now. It's not all a positive boost though. In this shot you can instantly notice the lack of leaves caused by the lower BVH geometry that is sampled here for all shadows using this ray tracing option. This is the same container that Reflections use, and although at very high they are better than the PlayStation 5's, which matches high, they are not close to direct geometry in the main viewport which shadow maps use, which includes the small leaves and branches that move around with shadow maps and are completely static here compared to those shadow map solutions. And thus, it can actually look broken at times due to this and the low polygon objects they rely on. I do hope that Nixes can increase the BVH container to improve this, or add in screen space shadows for the smaller or distant objects, which may be a good trade-off on PlayStation 5 and the medium to lower end PCs. That said, they are a nice to have, but for now, the cost on CPU and GPU versus the visual issues and lack of dramatic impact they make, it's around 10% generally. I would not recommend them on any PC though until updates come, or at least you have a top-end CPU and GPU, but the cost here is too high versus the payback in my opinion. In addition to this, the HBAO Plus has also been improved since the broken version we had in the remastered at launch at least, but they still lose some shade on alpha trees and other objects within the scene, which you can see here. And it can make some sections look flatter. And I'm not sure if these are broken on all machines or just AMD cards. They might even be better on Nvidia, but from my test here, I would still recommend that SSAO is used, as it offers around 3% better performance and it generally looks better than HBAO Plus. In regards to image quality on the PC or at least AMD GPU versions, Insomniac's temporal injection is far worse than the PlayStation 5. On PlayStation 5, it appears to work and blend within the motion blur and even depth of field, as it's probably symbiotic in its implementation on the consoles. As such, the image quality at all resolutions is far better on PlayStation 5 than PC, with less dithering and movement being especially noticeable on PC, where there's lack of depth of field and motion blur in areas. And it can appear broken, with alpha textures and post effects blending badly or not at all, causing fizzling details, a noisy image, and even significant reduction in texture details and foliage specifically. Compared to AMD's fully implemented FSR 2.1, it is no question here which one to use. Beating even native TAA 4K on PC, it can still not quite match the PS5 at fidelity mode, again specifically on foliage and textures, but it is my recommended choice due to it being closest to PlayStation 5 and reducing the issues of thin areas and general image softness and instability that the current implementation offers at least. I again hope the team can improve this further in later patches, but FSR 2.1 does generally save the day here, and it is still my recommended option at all resolutions on all PC specs, even over native. To summarise, Nixes have worked hard and fast to port such a tailored engine and technology to a myriad of PC specs. The Steam Deck stands out as a superb portable version of the Insomniac engine that impresses even with the sacrifices covered. The options offered allow it to run across a wide range of PC specs. The demands at the top end are higher again than many will have expected, but it's not that much of a shock based on the bespoke nature of the engine and its host console design. GPU wise, it scales very well, but CPU, it can definitely struggle at certain points, and the game can still struggle generally even with a 16GB RX 6800 here to load all mipmaps due to that data decompression and general management within the engine. At the same settings and resolution, it cannot quite match the PS5 in IQ, and detailed technical comparisons like this really highlight that, but generally, with FSR 2.1 options or DLSS 2 options, you can achieve the same or better results, with some improvements over the PS5. I would expect some more patches though to come and improve some of these areas covered here by Nixes, to adapt the technology to the DirectX pipeline a little better, and also the split architecture of PC, which certainly presents its own specific challenges for the game, the engine, and the team. Anyway, if you like all things data, pixels, and web slinging related, then keep it IGN, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Maybe! Don't bring RPGs anywhere!